Picture this. You're getting ready for a night out in town with your friends, and of course you want to look your best. Your ladies, you may go grab that pair of Manolo Blahniks that you finally splurged in when it bought, or maybe the sexy black dress that you got on sale at Macy's you just had to have. For the guys, maybe it's that pair of Cole Haan shoes, or those pair of Lucky Brand jeans that the ladies just love to see you in. You go spray on some of that good smelling perfume and cologne. You step out of your 2,500 square foot condo. You go slide into that freshly detailed black BMW 750 Li. You take one last look in that rearview mirror. And you say, I look good. And yes, you do look good. But what do you owe this all to? Where these products come from in the first place? And how were they available for you to purchase? Well, you may owe some of this to free trade. But before you go thinking free trade, you may want to listen to a few things I have to say. I'll tell you what free trade is, what the government's role is in free trade, and how free trade affects consumers such as you and I. What's free trade? Free trade is a system of trade policy that allows traders to act and transact without the interference of the government, according to the law of comparative advantage, which is the ability to produce a product most efficiently given all the products that can be produced. The policy permits trading partners to have mutual gains from the trade of goods or services. Under free trade policy, prices are the reflections of true supply and demand and are the sole determinant of resource allocations. Free trade differs, however, from the other trade policies where the allocations of goods or services are among trading companies are determined by artificial prices and may or may not reflect the true supply and demand. According to mainstream economic theory, global free trade is supposed to be a benefit to society. But selective application of free trade agreements to some countries and tariffs on others can sometimes lead to economic inefficiencies through a process called a trade diversion. It is economically efficient for a good to be produced by a country in which the lowest cost producer, but this will not always take place if the producer has a free trade agreement while the low country has a high tariff. Applying free trade agreements to the high cost producer and not the low cost one as well will lead to trade diversions and net economic losses. This is why many economics place such high importance on negotiations and global tariff reductions. If you take a look at the first slide in the presentation, it gives a picture of an economic perspective of how tariffs affect true supply and demand. Now, the government's role in trade agreements? Well, the government's main role is forming organizations that help regulate free trade, such as the WTO, which is the World Trade Organization, whose primary responsibility is to serve as an international body to help promote free trade by drawing up rules of international trade, but however, it has been mired in controversy and seemed to have been hijacked by rich countries, thus worsening the poor and inviting protests, and have been under much intense criticisms. Some of the other roles the government is supposed to serve? There's to serve as an intervention on subsidies, taxes, tariffs, non-tariff barriers such as regulatory regulation and quotas, and intergovernment managed agencies and agreements such as the North American Trade Agreement, NAFTA, or the Central American Trade Agreement. However, you do have some local governments such as the states that conduct trade policies that are of lesser degree, which comes in the form of agriculture subsidiaries, which countries attempt to protect their agriculture interests from outside competition by creating artificially low prices on their agriculture goods. And if you take a look at the second handout in the slide, it shows you how NAFTA tracks the U.S. import of goods and how they're bought. Now, these goods can be bought by individual consumers such as you and I, or they can be bought by companies. No matter, we're all consumers either way or the other. So, how does free trade affect consumers such as you and I? Well, we all know that the world is becoming more and more globalized. There's no doubt about that. While that may sound good, the current form of globalization makes free trade something much different than it should be. Open markets are becoming under much criticism. The interests of powerful nations and corporations are shaping the terms of world trade. And in democratic countries, they're shaping and affecting the ability for the leaders to make decisions that are in the best interest of the people that elected them. Elsewhere, they are promoting narrow political discourse and even supporting dictatorships and the stability that it brings in their interests. This is the determinant of most people of the world, which is making the rich get richer and the poor get poorer. In recent years, critics have argued that free trade just simply doesn't work. Their reasoning? Well, take a look at slides 3 and 4. This shouldn't be anything new to you guys, but as you know, the economic hardships that this country has been facing with the housing industry and the unemployment rate all over the country is really plummeting. Of course, following a period of economic boom, a big financial bubble is going to form. But what happens to that bubble if it gets so big? It's got to burst. And when it bursts, what happens? The problem gets worse. It gets so severe that some of the world's largest financial institutions have collapsed. Others have been brought under competition from their suppliers, in other cases, the governments of wealthy nations have resorted to instances of bailouts and rescue packages for the many large banks and financial institutions that exist. Some of these bailouts have led to changes in hypocrisy due to apparent socialization of costs or privatizing some of the profits. Furthermore, institutions being rescued are typically the ones that got the world into trouble in the first place. For smaller businesses, for poor people, such bailouts aren't really available. So what are they to do? This is the argument when the larger banks shows off signs of crisis. It's just not the wealthy that suffer. We all suffer. It's like a domino effect. The big guy falls, he falls into the little guy, and the little guy falls. But who does the little guy have to fall into? Statistics show that the plummeting markets have wiped out over 33% of the value of companies, to the tune of about $14.5 trillion. Wow. Taxpayers, on the other hand, they'll be one handling this. They'll be bailing out these companies for years to come. U.S. taxpayers alone will spend about $9.7 trillion in bailout packages and plans. The UK and other European countries have also spent some $2 trillion in rescue packages and bailouts, with more to be expected. In other words, it's not over yet, ladies and gentlemen. So don't into your hats. The storm is brewing. But I guess we'll have to wait for the government, who wasn't supposed to get involved in the first place, to come and get involved. Now that we talked about what free trade is and what the government's role currently is in free trade, and I've told you how free trade affects you and me, I hope that you learn a few things. I hope that you have a better understanding of what free trade is, and you think about that with every purchase that you make. Well, it's that loaf of bread at the grocery store, to the house that you buy, or when you step onto the lot picking out that new car. Think about it. This impacts the economy in some way. If you make that wrong purchase, it can be putting your neighbor out of business or even out of a job. Or maybe that neighbor could be you. So the next time you're out at the mall or you're picking out that new car, think about how this affects you. If you're not sure of how this affects you, do a little homework. Get educated. Make yourself smarter. Is this company the best company that I should buy this product or service from? If not, do a little research. Go on the internet. It's probably the best place you can look. Maybe in your local library. Just type in a question in the search engine and up pops the answer. Now that you may have questions to that, the internet may have to ask you, but maybe have a few questions for me. Any questions? If not, thank you and have a good evening.